5 members, we're legal now.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, looks like we are live on YouTube now,
All right.
everybody. And I have 2 o'clock, Vice Chair. Let's go
All
ahead
right,
and
let's go.
fire it up. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our July the 21st Strategic Planning Agenda. Now call this meeting to order. Do I have approval of the minutes, please?
So moved.
All right, if there are no objections, the minutes will stand as recorded. We have several items on our agenda to cover this evening, as well as an attorney-client privilege meeting at the end of our 2 o'clock meeting that we need to get to. So hopefully we'll be able to stick to our agenda today and try to move through it as swiftly as possible. At this time, we're going to have a discussion on steep slopes, and Madam Clerk, would you bring in John Bridger, please, for this discussion? Councilman Ledford?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to handle this part of the discussion, sir?
I would, sir. Thank you very much.
All right.
So thanks for allowing this to be placed on our agenda for discussion today. A couple of weeks ago, we did have a vegetative standards proposal for discussion, and it's been a couple of weeks since then. I hope that you've had a little bit of time. I know that we've had a tremendous amount on our plates, but hopefully you've had time to digest what the presentation brought forth. It is important to note, while we're waiting on Mr. Bridger to come in, we do not have standards that address this in our city, and I think it's extremely important that we put into place something that is easy to understand, offers a variety of vegetation, promotes tree canopy, promotes leaving caliber trees of 4-inch or more. There's a myriad of different components in this vegetation proposal that dots a lot of I's, crosses a lot of T's. Now, if you're looking for something 100% perfect in this world, then we might as well just go ahead and shut it down now. I think this does offer a component that is vitally missing in our standards code, and I think that we should move forward in drafting this as legislation. And I did speak with LDO about the enforcement part of this, including a penalty, and the penalties that they can address that if you'd like. But in order to keep with the chairman's spirit of moving this meeting along today efficiently, I would like to open it up, obviously, for discussion, but I would like to move that, ask this council if we're ready to move this into the next phase. And I would really want to say a big thank you to Councilman Mitchell, who has been right there prodding me, and even with the tornado and things that are going on. That was a nice word, Jer. Yeah. And I appreciate him keeping on task with this, because it's important. We have areas in District 2, District 1, all around the city, but those especially, that we need to add this component in. Now, that being said, we did talk a little bit about phase 2, and I think there's a lot of conversation to be had there still that we need to address. So I'm going to ask the council at some point, if Mr. Bridger can jump in here.
Councilman, it doesn't appear at this point, Madam Clerk, I don't see Mr. Bridger in attendance this afternoon. Do you?
He's here.
Is he?
Yes.
Oh, there, I see him now. Yeah, go ahead and bring him in, please.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with this. And I would think that in order to get something accomplished, which would be wonderful, hey John.
Hey.
Is to move this third component forward, and then maybe start discussions on that second component that you talked about, John. But I really don't want to hold this up. I think Councilman Mitchell is right on task, and we need to pass this. It's a good thing for the city. It's a good thing all the way around. And I would leave it at that. John, you want to pick up?
Councilman, before,
Oh.
hold on, John, before you go any further, and I think you mentioned, I think last week even, there was actually 3 phases, and the tree canopy, the reclaiming of the trees sort of addressed phase 3. There was still a phase 2 and a phase 1 that we needed to address as well. And I think what this council would like to do is task RPA to begin addressing all 3 phases and bring something to us that that we would be able to work with and then possibly bring to a vote, even if phase 1 has to do more with policy, and then maybe 2 and 3 we actually codify into some kind of ordinance. Go ahead, John, and unmute your mic, sir.
Yeah, I would say just whatever decision you make as council, what I would want to do is make sure, because I know there's been a lot of discussion, I would recommend that we develop a resolution. So whatever you all decide is in the scope of that, I would put it together in a resolution to put on y'all's agenda just to start that work. And so again, alluding to those options, you know, phase 1, I'm understanding, which relates to those kind of called pre-construction site design standards. I've heard, I guess what you all need to discuss this amongst yourselves. What I'm hearing is there was not an appetite to do any standards, or maybe do it as a policy like we already do in our plans. Then under phase 2, and just want to emphasize phase 2 and phase 3, that's that on-site construction management is phase 2. Phase 3 would be remediation. That's something that really would be implemented through LDO and Public Works. So they would really be the key, I guess, lead agency or department in terms of coming up with whatever appropriate tools that you would want for those 2 elements. I would be happy to help with the resolution, but just know as far as who's on point for which piece, RPA would be on sort of that phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 would be LDO and Public Works.
Okay. Councilman Ledford.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, I talked to LDO this morning, and I agree with Bridger on the different phases 1 and 2 and 3 in their classifications and responsibilities. I understand from LDO, and they may be available, Dallas or Charlie or Jeremy might be available to kind of expand on this, but they are looking more, I think, into the realm of enforcement and penalties for non-adherence to their current policies. They do have, I know we talked about clear cutting, we talked about different components, and they do have the plans and clear cutting in there. It's just, I think that where they're talking about right now is enforcement. I don't want to put words in their mouth. My concern is waiting for 1, 2, and 3 as a complete package kind of piggybacks on what Councilman Mitchell said a few weeks ago, and that is, if we're going to try to swing for the fences, then we may miss the ball completely. I would like to see at least the resolution move forward with the vegetation component so that we can at least get something going, because I think the other 2 are going to have some back and forth dialogue with LDO. It doesn't mean we can't address them, but if we don't move forward with something, then we're just going to sit here spinning our wheels, and we're going to look at ourselves next March and or January, and we've got nothing accomplished because we're trying to swing for the fence. That's kind of where I'm at.
Let me bring in Councilman Mitchell, then Councilwoman Burrs.
I believe Councilwoman Burrs was before me.
Okay, Councilwoman Burrs.
Thank you. Thank you. So Darren, my question is mainly one of clarification. I like this vegetative standards proposal and the overlay concept and all of that. Are you seeing this as step 1, and then everything else that was brought forth by John earlier, we're still working on?
Yes, ma'am. So in my vision, in order to accomplish something, is to actually work from step 3 backwards. So step 3, the vegetative component, or let's call it phase 3, would actually be step 1. And then we could get that behind us, get that legislation going, then come back and look at 2, then look at 1, or if we want to switch up 1 and 2 in the phases. It doesn't really matter, whatever the council desires. But I just feel like we need to get something moved forward so that we can kind of like stop thinking about it so much. I mean, we've got a great plan here. You know, time will tell And the longer we wait, month by month, the shorter time frame this council has to actually do something as a body together. That's my big concern.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question, actually both questions for the attorney.
Sure.
Mr. Attorney, wouldn't this be an ordinance instead of a resolution?
Yes, sir. If you're trying to make a requirement for something to be done here that would be subject to any type of violation or fine in the city, it would have to be. And I guess my confusion at this point in time, we currently have adopted at least the land disturbing activity and erosion and sedimentation controls in Chapter 31 of the code. So if you're going to have some additions to that, that's probably where it would need to go. And we have adopted it in our standards here, the TDEX erosion and sediment control handbook. So we'd have a uniform body to be able to go through. So probably needs to be considered in light of that.
Hold on just a minute, Jerry. I think to answer your question, what Mr. Bridger was referring to is a resolution asking RPA to start the work. Not of drafting an ordinance. This wouldn't be a resolution that pertains specifically to what's in it. This is just asking RPA create some language addressing X, Y, Z.
Well, if that's the case, I mean, could we not do that by consensus and not wait 2 weeks for a resolution to appear on an agenda, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
I like the way you think, Councilman.
Mr. Bridger, you have any problem with that, with just a consensus from this council?
Yeah, I think, I think as long as there's a formal consensus, because we don't want to work on something that the whole body would want to see done, just make sure everybody's on the same page. And I would say if we're just doing phase 3, really that would be LDO, Public Works. I mean, I'd be happy to kind of, as always, be a member of their team and help consult. But just know that we would not be quarterbacking that. That would be LDO and Public Works.
John, I think though, to keep you or RPA in the loop, I think you would need to be part of that.
Yeah,
Even if
I would certainly be happy to.
even if LDO is creating the language. But,
Yeah.
John, do we need some kind of bullet points of what language you want? That's the other question.
I'll provide it for you, Phil. It's the presentation that LDO has a copy of it. I've already made sure that they have a full copy of our presentation. I've spoke with them again this morning, and they do have the presentation with all the information I believe they need.
Okay.
So they'll be glad to share that with you, sir.
So let me put it this way then, John. Is there anybody on the council that would not agree with allowing RPA to go forward with these bullet points and creating an ordinance or some legislation for steep slopes? Any objection to them beginning this work? John, I am seeing no objections from this council for RPA to begin this work.
And John, our office will help. No problem.
Yeah, and like I said, just know I'll be leaning heavily on LDO. So Dallas and Charlie, hope you're tuning in.
They should be on, John.
Councilman Gilbert. Let me ask you this, Councilman Mitchell, did you have another question?
Yeah, I have one more question, and it's actually it's about steep slopes. So hang with me here. The river to ridge plan. There's a piece in it right now, and of course we're not voting on it until next week, but they actually mentioned the steep slope itself at 25%. And of course, we were talking in the meeting a couple of weeks ago, I believe the number 35% was thrown out there. Mr. Attorney, if we go ahead and approve the plan and that's sitting at 25%, but then we create an ordinance that says 35%, would that ordinance take precedent over the plan?
Yes, sir. The ordinance would, if it's more restrictive, it would take precedent on there, and it would be whatever has occurred after the date of the enactment of the ordinance, not for anything that was started before the ordinance was enacted.
Okay, thank you. And last thing I'd have, Mr. Chair, is we've had the home builders involved from the very beginning, and it seems like it's been a fairly good relationship. At least it seems that way to me. And I would just want to make sure that they are involved, not asking them to set our laws, but asking, I guess, do we want to deal with them now, or do we want to deal with them when we got it on the agenda? And here come the comments at that point versus trying to work something through during the process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I completely agree, sir. Councilman Gilbert.
Based on what our lawyer said about erosion and things we got in place now, it seems that we do have things in place, but there's no teeth behind if I violate it. You know, for example, they take it to court, but it just go right through. Nothing happens. I thought that we was going to look at if someone violate something that we have set in place, that we already have in place, that we shut them down until they fix the problem. In other words, they can't do any more construction anywhere until they fix the problem they have created. Are we still looking at things in that nature? Because my understanding is we don't have no kind of teeth at all to enforce anything.
Well, that would be the phase 2 aspect of this ordinance, of the steep slope ordinance as well. And that's where LDO has given us a proposed wording for a lot of that.
Yes, that's correct.
That as we move through this, we will be able to address.
Okay, so that's phase 2, the next phase.
That would be phase 2. That's correct.
All right, thank you.
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman, if there's no more questions, I'll step off this topic.
Okay. Do not see any other hands at this time. Okay.
Need to remove Mr. Bridger, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Go ahead and see Mr. Bridger out. All right. Next up on our agenda is the proposed budget amendments. And before I turn it over to Budget and Finance, Mr. Attorney, and I guess just for clarification, for our edification, kind of walk us through the procedure of what something like this would even look like if we went down this road, sir.
Normally, I guess you would go in accordance with your council rules on how things get brought up. And that's one of the issues. I guess normally if our office has prepared an ordinance for you, we have to have that submitted to us no later than 11:30 on the Tuesday, 2 weeks prior to the council meeting, which y'all are discussing it today. I didn't get this until I guess Saturday morning. This week here, and we did not prepare these ordinances that are on your agenda. So that's
let's be clear. These are not ordinances.
yes, sir. They're proposals.
They're suggested ordinances. So these are not ordinances.
Yes, sir. And to accomplish what is requested in these documents, it would require an ordinance amendment of the budget ordinance that was previously passed back in June. So that's one of those issues here. So normally you got to follow your procedures that you have for legislation before it can come up in front of you. So this is irregular in that regard in how that was presented. Normally to get something on the agenda for discussion, you're supposed to have, as y'all know, at least 2 council members doing that and setting it up. So that's part of the concern. There are a lot of concerns, at least on my review of the documents, insofar as these documents basically are sometimes talking about giving money to city agencies, sometimes to non-city agencies that did not make requests. And those are issues that you have to consider. There's also concerns insofar as one of the documents is actually requesting that there be an amendment to a procedure that is required by state law in order for y'all to continue to get funding. And I'll go through those whenever you have questions about them on here. But the court cost provision here, trying to take out a foreign language translator fee, I could not figure out what the reason or rationale that might be. And in fact, that would cause you to lose Title VI money that you get from the state on projects because you have to comply with state law.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Coonrod has asked that we look at these proposed budget amendments and seeing how they do deal with budget and finance. I have asked Councilwoman Burrs, who is our budget and finance chairperson, to oversee this item. So Councilwoman Burrs, I'm going to turn the floor over to you at this time, ma'am.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's exactly right. If a council person wants us to look at something, normally we have a discussion about it, and then it is put on a 2-week agenda if we decide to go further. As our attorney said, things are a little bit backwards because we've had several weeks of discussion already. And I thought that perhaps it might be a good idea to talk about community input and when that really started. And then we will pick up about community input beginning with May when we got the budget, to give you sort of a good foundation of where we are now and for people not to think that there hasn't been community input. So I believe Ms. Sullivan's on to just do a quick overview of what we've been doing starting, I guess, last November. Ms. Sullivan, if you would.
Madam Clerk, would you bring Ms. Sullivan?
Working on it, sir.
Oh, I forget, Vice Chair, thank you.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that you just asked about community input and the budget process. Is that correct?
That's right.
Great. So our BFO process, the way that we do our budgets here in Chattanooga is really based on public input. And it is a different way of doing budgeting, as you all know, and just for the public's edification as they are listening, it is a different way of doing budgeting. We don't just look at the budget line item by line item, department by department, and then look at it from that department's perspective. We push all of that on its head, and we make value areas that we would like, that then we encourage the public, members of the public, departments, agencies to come forward with ideas to make the city better around the value sections of the budget that we have put forward as our most important. Those are safer streets, stronger neighborhoods, et cetera, that we've worked with every year. So we start the budget process in September of every year. And we have our kickoff meeting in September or October with departments and agencies. We create our results teams, and results teams are part of that BFO budget process. And we have members of the community as well as members of the administration, different departments who sit on these results teams and review all of the offers that come in. And these are budget proposals. These are proposals for money and for doing work around the priorities of our city. And so we have appointed the results teams in November, and then December we started our public engagement sessions, and we had in-person and virtual public engagement sessions. We had 3 in-person sessions at community centers, at our YFD centers around the city, and then we had an online portal where you could answer questions, drop in ideas, and give your beliefs and thoughts as a member of the general public about the priorities of the city and what is important to you about the budget. And we did that through the month of December and through about mid-December, I think it was. And then we take all of that information. We had about 250 or so people who gave us their thoughts and opinions and ranked the priorities of the city and the priorities of city work through that process. And we give that to the leadership team and to all the results teams. And that helps us create what we then we call our our results maps, which are the results, the mapping towards the results that we're trying to achieve as a city. So we're asking, this gives the offer writers, the people who are submitting budget requests, gives the offer writers the direction to go for making their budget requests. So we send those out in late December, and then in early January, mid-January, the initial budget offers, the initial budgeting for outcomes, the initial BFOs come in, and they get reviewed by the results teams. Again, community members and members of the departments who sit on these results teams. And then the final offers come in February, and those are ranked. They're evaluated by the results teams. They're ranked, comes into the leadership team. And then we try to afford as many of the great ideas as we can with our fiscally constrained budget and the amount of revenues that we project to come in. And we create a draft of a budget together as a leadership team through the expertise of our finance department. And so that's the process that we went through this year that we have in previous years. And then of course, March came, early March came, and everything changed, right? So we had created a budget, and then when COVID hit, we knew that our revenues were not going to be the same, and that everything that we were doing was not going to be the same. And so we started then refining our projections and trying to decide how look into the crystal ball that everyone across the country and the world was looking into to figure out what our projections were going to be. And so we made altered projections, and we made deep cuts to all of our departments. We really changed, went to our agencies and did flat funding for the agencies. Some agencies no funding. It was not the most exciting budget time that we've been through, of course, but one that was necessary to keep our city going and to keep our city prosperous and to prepare us for when we come out of COVID, that we're ready to move forward. All the divisions of city government were cut. All of their budgets were cut. The police budget, for instance, one of the largest budgets, was cut over $1 million at that point. Transportation department was cut over $1 million. Public Works, they all received cuts over, and this was necessary again to be able to present a balanced budget to you, which we did in May. And then we went through a process in May of you having received the budget and continuing to have additional public input and your review of the budget that does have an $8.4 million reduction in revenues in it from previous year. And I hope that helps lay the foundation of how we got to where we are.
Thank you.
Past the budget.
So you had about 250 people participate on the various committees and meetings. Did you have any idea how many people participated online?
It was about 250 altogether between online and the in-person. And we have a report that's on our website, and I don't remember all the numbers in my head, but we do have a report that shows how many responses came in online and how many responses were in-person. And I attended all the meetings. I can tell you that there were some that had 45, 50 people there, and it was. I enjoy them every year, but I'm a budget nerd, so but I do enjoy being there, and I enjoy when you council members come and join us in your areas and your necks of the woods, and I think it's a good time to be with community members and to look at the priorities for the city.
Thank you. And then to add to that, each one of us, I'm sure, I know in my district, had community meetings and got inputs from our neighborhood associations and various others about what to put in the budget. So I guess that segues into us. And we got the budget on May 19th and an overview of the budget. And then on May 26th, June 2nd, June 9th, and June 16th, we started our discussions. They were over 2 hours each. And on the 26th, we talked about employee compensation. And by the way, the things we talked about were defined by council. Council defined the topics we talked about, and then we had the people there to educate and answer questions. And they had to do with employee compensation, agency funding, capital projects, paving. And then we went over capital projects again and some of the agencies. And the final meeting was police, YFD, 911, CARTA. And then from the 23rd on, and let me say that on the 9th, we had our public hearing that meeting went on till about 1 in the morning. And then from then on the 29th, the 23rd, the 30th, the 7th, and the 14th, the chair allowed for further discussion and input from the community. So here we are, and following our procedure, a council person brings up an issue, and we have discussion about it. And then we put or don't put it on the 2-week agenda. And that's pretty much where we are now. So we've had a great deal of this. We've had a great deal of discussion. Chairman Henderson, did you want to?
No, I'll wait. Go ahead.
Okay. So we've had a great deal of discussion and input, and I know even more in our own communities. So now it's time to ask 2 questions. Number one, is there a need for any other discussion? And if not, then we need to make a decision whether we want to put these topics, I guess, on the 2-week agenda, or actually what you're talking about is asking our legal department to come up with something for a 2-week agenda. Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, 8 of us voted to fund the Chattanooga Police Department nearly $70 million back in June. Personally, I see that as a contractual agreement, a promise, if you will, that we made to the men and women of the CPD to provide them $70 million for them to do their job. Forget the line items. It was a total of $70 million. And I think at this point, to vote to take away any amount demonstrates a lack of understanding of our role as legislators. So I'd like to move that we go no further with these suggested amendments. And that's in the form of a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second that. Okay. There is a motion and a second that we go no further with these amendments. And the attorney 2 weeks ago told us, because this is virtual, we have to take a vote. And so I will call on you as I see you on the screen.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
you do have a few hands that we definitely want to hear from our colleagues first.
Sure. Who's that? Mr. Byrd, Ms. Coonrod. Let me add one other thing, and then I'll call on you, which I left out, and that's my fault. We took a first vote, and you're right, 8-1 on the 16th, and then a second vote, 8-1 on the 23rd. And then these proposals came in on the 29th. Okay, Mr. Byrd.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure.
I understand the sentiments of the council and the body that's here today. I just have a issue with we had a nuclear bomb sort of say, in the form of COVID-19 hit our city. And all the process that you laid out, Chair, and everything that you explained, you're 100% right. The process is the process. We do have to do things in an orderly fashion. We did put out information. People were able to come and talk about these things and talk about what they want to see in the budget. I get it. You're 100% right. And we did make a commitment to the police department, Chair. But when I look at what we're dealing with now, this catastrophic thing that's going on in the world, we have to walk around with masks, we have to do social distancing. A lot of people are out of work. They're even discussing passing another stimulus check to help people out. So when I look at the issues that's going on and I look at our budget, it does make me want to question, like, do we go back and talk about these things, or at least have a discussion? Because although the food bank didn't supply any type of BFO, do they need food? A lot of people around my community, I do know, suffer from lack of food sometimes, especially during these hard areas and these hard times. And when I talk to people on the police force, and I talk to people and colleagues and friends of mine that work in the police force, and we talk about whether it's a lie detector test, a polygraph test, or certain things that we should take a look at that maybe not for years to come, but for this year, to stockpile food or something for some constituents that may need it, it's good to take a deeper dive and look into it. When we look at housing and we look at things that's going on amongst housing, we have on the table right now a trade school that we're trying to get done at Henrietta Barger. I mean, at the Barger Elementary, not Henrietta Barger, by the Nippon Paint Company. I apologize. I think that, you know, even monies with that to just encourage kids to be able to learn a trade, to look at if we're putting money into a facility for officers to learn and have shooting practice and things of that nature, offsetting to say, hey, let's put money toward this trade school. We're looking at troubling times here in our community. The process has been done. I do understand. We did give everyone time, but the pandemic was not here. So in my heart, in my mind, I want to take a deeper dive and say, hey, are there things we can tweak? If me and my wife decided to buy a Range Rover right now, and then my wife passed, I'm gonna have to reconsider paying for this Range Rover because a catastrophic thing happened in my family. Right now, the constituents of Chattanooga, us, we're family. And I just think sometimes maybe we have to look at some things, and maybe it is some things that may not be needed right now in this budget that can be tweaked. Even things in my community, I understand that it's some stuff maybe that I won't get in my community for this budget, but I still think it's some things to be tweaked for the greater good of everyone. So I just would like to see you guys reconsider and maybe pick out a few things, because I did, that maybe we could take a look into that would not hurt the police department, would not hurt the city, and would not put a blemish on our department if we just looked at it and maybe reconsidered some of the funding. That's all.
Councilman, I got to tell you something. I think you've done a fabulous job. The energy and the input that you've done with your community is excellent, and I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I guess the thing that occurs to me is I'm not so process bound. I'm thinking that can still do a lot of these things without doing budget amendments. That's one of the things that Coach has been talking about. So, boy, I see us both on the same page, and I want to thank you very much for the energy and the great things that you've done. Councilwoman Coonrod, same for you. You've done a great job.
Thank you, Chair. I want to make sure that I say it the right way, because people get offended about a lot of things in the community that I serve. But and Mara is right. Like, we have these budget sessions every year around the same time. We're darn near begging people to please come take part in it. And, you know, even figured out ways, if you can't physically come to the meeting, then just, hey, share your thoughts and concerns online. You can email us. For months, we've asked that. Even, you know, council members have You know, even before the budget session started for input, we've even said, hey, reach out, this is coming up. And again, it's like it fall on deaf ears until it's time for the council to vote for the budget. Now, we all understand marketing, and marketing is so powerful to where people be sleeping outside of stores just to get phones that they've never seen before. And I think we have to have our marketing to the point where people want to sleep outside to make sure that their input is added into the budget on the front end. But my concerns is that the pandemic that we were hit with, the tornado that we was hit with, a lot of people are still suffering. So I think, you know, taking a look at the things that we can change that wouldn't affect our police department, like the polygraph testing, the community outreach services, maybe we could partner with, you know, ECD or YFD that's already doing outreach and include, you know, their need for outreach into that. Affordable housing, I think we should, you know, it need to be increased. Maybe we could, you know, just those small things there that we can move. And if, you know, later on, then it could be added back. We're not saying that right now, this is what it needs to be permanent. Just asking to take a deeper dive in it. I know Anthony Byrd, he did vote against the budget, and he asked for community members to send a plan, not just specifically from the DSA people, but anybody who had a plan that we can try to, you know, take a look at to see what we could change, or, you know, what are the possibilities. Now, I know there are people out there that's hungry, but the thing is this, we've had people who got $600 a week for the past 16 weeks. That's 4 months. On top of getting a $1,200 stimulus and other things that follow with that. So my thing is that we need to position them for opportunities, what we talked about last week with the funding, looking at funding sources that we already have, and to position them for financial stability. Because it's no way that anyone should be hungry if you've got an increase in food stamps and you're getting that kind of money. Here it is that many of our council people, we've worked endlessly to make sure that people in our districts and outside of our districts are not going hungry. But when I think about the fact that when I go home to my house and Peyton and I are eating noodles, but I'm making sure my constituent have a steak, I gotta reevaluate that, because the constituents that I serve have had money flowing in, right, from our taxpayers. So we got to make sure that we're not continuing the cycle of keeping our people in poverty and continuing to push this mindset of poverty. It's time for us to shift that, whether if it's creating opportunities through our departments to, you know, create wealth opportunities. And in whatever way that that looks like, we can't, you know, my role isn't to keep our people in poverty. And you know, I gotta agree with Chip at this point. You know, if we're not able to move any of these things around, because I 100% support my police department, and I'm gonna be the first person to call them. Be the first person to call them when I see something that's going wrong, and if they, because every day it's somebody getting killed in my neighborhood. Every day, they just found remains of a body just a week or so ago, right in Eastdale, 2 blocks away from where I live at. So yes, the police is necessary in my community, and I wish that we can get more cameras in my neighborhood. But the thing is that we're lacking is when these people are getting killed, and they look like me, they're Black people getting killed by Black people, and we refuse to address that. Will the police be, is the police being there, is that gonna solve Black people killing Black people? No. What's gonna solve that is Black people need to stop killing Black people. And those that are doing the killing, that people need to speak up if you see these acts happening. Changing the budget isn't gonna change that at all. But again, I do, you know, just those 2 things. If the council isn't willing to, then I just ask that constituents, you get in front of it. Reach out to more, the mayor, the administration, your council person, email them, whatever you feel that you want to have added into the budget, so we can start advocating on that, because you may not be able to come to a meeting, or you may get caught up and you know, don't have the time to, you know, email during that time, whatever it may be, but get with us now so we can make decisions, you know, throughout the year. Let's not just wait till the last minute next time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. You've worked really hard on this and you represent your people well. Thank you very, very much. Councilman Gilbert.
Thank you, Chair. This question is probably for our lawyer, Phil. I know back in the past where a department actually went over their budget, they didn't shut down the department. They just found money in other areas to place into the department to balance it out. Phil, is there any way, I mean, we can, I mean, not we, but administration can put money in different areas that have to legally. Because I know in the past, like I said before, that when departments went over budget, they still managed that department, even going over budget. So instead of trying to defund some department or trying to change the budget or make an amendment to the budget, I think that based on what I heard from Councilman Byrd, there is a food bank, there is a shortage of food. And maybe we can look at things in our budget that we can move things around like we have done in the past. The question, Phil, you there?
Yes, sir.
So tell me legally, can things be moved around?
Things can be moved around if you have money in your budget that comes in. That's one of the problems in a COVID environment that we're experiencing this year as to what will that eventually be. You have to have the money in your funds every year in order to be able to do that, and it has to be balanced every year, or the state will really have a problem with you. The problems, we have so many things in different areas in your budget that need to be considered. Many of those are related to actual wages of employees. If employees are entitled to their wages, they're supposed to be paid. If employees work overtime, they're normally supposed to be paid for their overtime hours. If there is things that they need to have that in the budget here to be able to establish that each year. So those are some of the problems that you deal with, because the state of Tennessee, unlike, unless you have a bond issuance that comes out that brings in additional funds, or you have more taxes coming in than you expected during the year, it makes it very difficult to alter that. If you have more money coming in than you thought you were going to get, then maybe you can do that later on. Right now, the problem is you're starting about $8 million in the hole and you don't know where you're going to be at the end of the year.
So where I was correct, you can move things around if the money is there to move.
Yes, sir.
Whereas you can go to different departments, you had to do it and take things out of each one of them. You have to make a balance.
I think the mayor's office does that generally whenever they're dealing with issues that they have where there are things that are appropriate at the time, but the funding for the department is something that is established in the budget ordinance by the council.
Correct. What I'm saying is administration can change that. Again, if I go over my budget in the past, they compensated that overage.
They normally would need to come back to you for a budget amendment if you're changing that at the
go.
point in time for the amounts.
I remember many times that they went over budget, some departments, and they didn't come back to city council for any additional money. So that's what I'm saying.
That's one reason at the end of the year, y'all usually do a budget amendment to try to make sure if you've done things differently that you said you were going to do at the beginning of the year, and you make that a match up. Otherwise, the folks from the state will be coming in saying that you're not spending your money appropriately.
Yeah.
Are you good, Councilman?
Not really, but I can keep going. We can move on.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's get back on topic. Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've heard three people speak pretty eloquently, and what I chose to hear from their message, which might not be their message, but what I chose to hear from their message was that they want to see things flexible enough to move things around. I think we're already hearing from different council people that that's probably not going to happen this year because of COVID. That's probably not going to happen this year. So So I think that, and by the way, I want to say, Mara, I think the administration did a heck of a job based on what you were given in March, and to make the adjustments you made were incredible. But I think going back through the process, a lot of decisions had been made before COVID. And I think that what happened at that point is, well, they just get less money. But we didn't necessarily change directions. And what I want to hear, is a tone from the council before we take this vote, or possibly after we take this vote. But what I'd really like to hear is, and I know individually, every one of us council people have at times spoken to the administration and said, okay, there's a possibility to move some money. And if it's related to our district, yeah, okay, yeah, they would involve us in that decision making. But there are 9 elected officials on this screen. So I would ask the council that as we move forward, however this vote turns out, that we make a commitment as a team to work with the mayor to go look for these ways to do some different things, and to go look for ways to transfer monies if it's not being used for the most beneficial way. I personally think we heard a lot of things that would be beneficial that were given to us by figuring out how to make that work is probably in government. That's probably our job. And if we can figure out that way, I guess what I'm asking for from the council is, even though we, some of us longer than others, have been doing BFOs for quite a while, I would like to see some potential in this last year of our term. I'd like to see some potential reform in the way we do things, and not just wait on that budget amendment to come from the mayor's office. You get with the mayor and start saying, okay, question the mayor, okay, what about this? What about, can we move this? What can we do this? I, like Councilperson Coonrod, am going to be the first person to stand in front of any police person that feels in danger. So I'm not about defund. I'm not about that at all. But what I am about is, can we find ways to make a difference and reform how this city operates and make it worthwhile during this last year? I'm not talking about necessarily today. I'm not talking about necessarily next week. I'm talking about these things will show themselves to us. And as a group, as a body, let's step up. We are elected by the people, and let's equal the mayor in his efforts and see if we can make a difference this last year. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think I couldn't agree with you more, Councilman Mitchell. When I look at an annual budget, I'm looking at a macro budget. The 2021 budget is a macro budget, but within those various silos of funds, there's all kinds of room for movement. And as a matter of fact, we're the ones that approve and bring up that movement. So I think we're not more talking about the micro system. And as you well know, all throughout the year, we talk about reusing money in different ways. And Councilwoman Coonrod's department, Youth and Family Development, is the one that's really been doing a good job and moving that around. So I think we all agree with you. I would like to get us past the macro decision so that we can start doing exactly what you're talking about. So let's get back to the issue at hand. And I need to know, and there's a motion on the floor to not bring any of the suggested changes to our agenda. Is there any more discussion about that? What that would in fact do, bring closure to the macro question. Anything else? Okay, then I will call as I see you, and a yes would mean bringing no more changes, supporting Councilman Henderson's motion. Councilman Gilbert, you're muted. You're still muted.
Yes.
Councilman Henderson,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilman Mitchell,
I'm going to take your all's word for it that we're going to work on this some more, and I'm going to say yes.
Councilman Oglesby,
Yes.
Councilman Ledford,
Yes.
Councilwoman Coonrod,
No.
Councilman Byrd.
No.
Thank you very much. There will be, these items will not be moved forward. We will get on to the business at hand of the council. And with that, I turn it over to you, Chair Henderson.
Madam Chair.
Hold on one second.
Yes,
Who was that? Councilman Ledford?
yeah.
Yes, sir. Just in response, Councilman Mitchell had a good point of whether before or after this vote, we said something. And I wanted to affirm to him that of the commitment of this council working as a team, you know, from day one, when we were elected as this group, I felt we had a very special bond, and I still think we have a very special bond. And I don't think that anybody is in doubt of the how or the why. I'm sorry. I think it's just the how, and I want to get to the how. And I think that's where we're moving towards. And I think it's very important. And this body is working together. Even though we may vote differently, we think differently. We're all 9 unique individuals who bring our own perspective. But to echo your comments, Councilman Mitchell, yes, I want to find that how. And I think we're getting there through this conversation. And I think that commitment is there. So I want to thank everybody for their input. And this is how we're going to do things the right way.
Councilman Gilbert?
Going back to what Councilman Jerry Mitchell said, in order for us to do that, we need to put a date on something. If we talking about it now, we don't have no kind of date, no kind of going back to see what you can do. At least put something in there. It's going to be a month from now, 2 months from now, but at least we have something there right now that we said commit to that we're going to go forward with.
I
All right.
second that.
Councilwoman Burrs, you want to
Yeah, I do.
come back in on this conversation?
Yes, I do. I think that we've had a council person, Councilman Mitchell, bring up what I would like to see become a committee of us looking at this and coming up with ideas to bring forward for us to discuss with administration. If you attach that to a committee, then somebody is minding the shop there. And I think it's very important that we do that. And I would very much like to be part of that committee. Thank you, sir.
I'll tell you what, let me, Madam Clerk, let's put this on our next strategic planning agenda. I think we do need to create an agenda for this committee to look at. And I think we need to look at things like workforce development. I think we need to look at affordable housing. I think we need to look at food deserts. I think we need to look at, as Councilwoman Coonrod mentioned earlier, the violence that we see in many of our communities and how we can decrease that violence, how we can educate, how we can better educate our constituents. And that's the coalition that I would like to have this discussion in, is how do we elevate our constituents to where we're all prospering and that we're all living that American dream. And I think that's the types of items that this committee needs to be looking at, and looking at how we fund something, not necessarily how we defund or divest from something. But I'd be very happy to have those conversations. And let's put that on our strategic planning for in 2 weeks, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Okay, we are rolling up on the 3 o'clock hour. Ms. Sullivan, thank you for being here with us. Vice Chair, do you want to see Ms. Sullivan out? I think she's completed her task. We are rolling up on the 3 o'clock hour. Mr. Attorney, how long do you need in your attorney-client privilege?
If I can have about 10 minutes, it would help.
10 minutes is all you need? Well, we're
Yes,
gonna figure 15 then.
Okay, sir.
So we will go to the quarter after. Now moving on to our other business, pending presentations and education sessions, we have none. Pending legislative matters, we have none. But Councilman Mitchell, I think you have an item that we need to discuss about our hearing impaired interpreter. Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to say thank you to my teammates on the council. Thank you, partners, for what you just did. Thank you. Yeah, when I have spoken to the partnership and really need a little direction from you before I go any further. One question is do we want an interpreter for everything? In other words, when we start a strategic planning meeting, or if there's no strategic planning meeting, or when we're starting agenda session, does the council feel that we need these services throughout the Tuesdays? That's be my first question. My second, and of course, you know, some of the things that we'll be working with. These folks work for 1 hour at a time. So they will be providing two different people where one will work for 1 hour, one will work for the next hour, and then the original person will come back on. One technical potential difficulty is going to be something hopefully the vice chair can help us figure out. We want this person always on the screen. So when we go to our clock and do different things, and we've heard folks say, why can't I see you? And this person literally would need to be on the screen at all times, no matter what is happening. And then the last question that they asked me is, where would this person or these people be located? And so we have to come up with, as long as we're on Zoom, do we make an office at the council office available? Do we ask them to do it from home? I'm not sure what that might limit the number of people that they have available. I'm not sure about that. But those are the three basic things that I need some direction before I go back. And probably with that third question, I think, Mr. Chair, I would probably ask that from this point on, I could give them contacts and telephone numbers, and maybe you can thank me afterwards, Nicole. We can turn it over to Nicole and her staff to sort of make these arrangements and help us with those decisions, if that's okay with the rest of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mitchell. I appreciate you looking into this for us. Any questions or comments from the council, maybe to give Councilman Mitchell or our clerk some direction now that we've sort of turned it over to her? Councilwoman Coonrod. Well, okay, we've got several now.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, I know we got to get going, but you mentioned creating a committee to, dive deeper into specific issues. And I know we've been talking about the GARE and racial equity training that Mitchell and I are working a part of. And Mara had suggested like doing a retreat type thing. If we can maybe just incorporate that into the retreat so we can really dive deep into it that way. Because I believe that every issue is important, and it needs, all of us need to be working on it, not just a couple of people.
No, I agree. I think it needs to be the committee of the whole addressing that. Councilwoman Burrs.
Back on topic, Jerry's question. Councilman, I think the interpreter should be at all the meetings. You're talking about signing as opposed to any sort of subtitling or anything like that?
Yeah, I believe the services they're offering are going to be signing.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the really good discussion on issues happens at the earlier meetings. And so I would suggest as a starting point that they be with us whenever we're public like this.
Okay.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to lend my support and let you know, Jerry, I'm willing to jump in full feet with you on this. There is, I've got a little background with the hard of hearing impaired, deaf community. And I know that there's some other issues probably underlying here. I did work with CPD on developing a program with them stopping people who cannot hear in order to identify that not everybody can read sign language. I want to make sure you understand that not everybody can read sign language who has a hearing difficulty. So that's something we also need to consider. Matter of fact, if you looked at some of the percentages, I had a gentleman in this week already. His name is David, a good friend of mine, who has the difficulty in hearing and does a lot of work in the community. And he makes sure that I know that he does not sign language. He does read lips. And that is a vital part of what we're trying to accomplish. So I'd be glad to plug in, reach out to my contacts in the deaf community and see what kind of feedback we can get on and make sure that our services that we offer, and I agree with you 100% in addressing this, is holistic and we don't leave folks out.
Thank you.
Before I go to Councilman Gilbert, let me pick up on and just ask this question. Did you ask the question, or is it even possible maybe to do a closed caption process instead of an actual signing interpreter?
No, I didn't ask the question. That's a great question. The service they offered, but that would have been a great question to ask while I had them.
Okay, maybe that's something that we might look into as a closed caption aspect and in lieu of an interpreter. Councilman Gilbert.
You hit it right on the head, Chair. That's what I was going to ask about.
Oh, okay.
Because a lot of times on television, you can see everything they're saying. If you can read it, you can see it. So that would be a great opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. My question would be for Vice Chair Smith. Is it possible to have a double split screen? And being, if we had a closed caption screen or if we had an interpreter screen, could we do a split screen where the clock could be seen as well as an interpreter?
The way that we're currently set up, if we do a share screen, then that just takes over the view by default. I can try to look into if there's any way to have two different presentations. At this point, I'm not familiar with a way to do it, but there may be a way.
Okay. Personally, I just think it's important that the speakers understand and see their time. And of course, I know we've had some complaints about them not being able to see us, but they still know we're here. Any other questions or comments? Councilman, I think on location, I would think that, that they could obviously use the office or empty office there in the council chamber or in the council office, but I would suspect or think that they might want to just do this from home as well as a location. Madam Clerk, if you want to get with me, if you have, or Councilman Mitchell, if you have any additional questions as we kind of work through this, I'll be happy to discuss it with you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns about this item? Okay. All right, we have about 7 minutes left before we need to go into attorney-client privilege. We do have about 5 items under future legislation and education, and I'm just going to throw it out there as a group. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of these items that they'd like to talk about at this time?
Mr. Chair?
Councilwoman Burrs.
Yeah, I think you can take the thing about the reports off. We can just say we want them. Everybody said they wanted the reports from the various, we've said it for ages. We've just never set up a schedule.
Okay, all right. Madam Clerk, if you would take number 3 off of 4C, please.
Yes.
Quarterly
And I
report.
guess, Phil, do we talk with you about it because your attorneys are on each one of these, like the beer board,
Yes, ma'am. Each board has an attorney from our office assigned to it on there. We just need to know a schedule of when you'd like to hear some type of report from them, and we can ask the board to give us something for that time period. And you want some sort of written report, or do you want some kind of, I guess, presentation by the board? We'll try to arrange whatever you wish.
Well, what I had in mind, if I may, Chair, is we appoint people to a beer board, and then, and we also create the ordinance.
Yes.
You know, is it all working? Can we do better? Or pick any board. That's the kind of thing I was interested, not how many people they see.
Okay.
I mean, they see whoever they see.
So in other words, just things that might improve the efficiency of the board meetings or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Or problems they're seeing in the ordinance. Okay, we can do that.
Councilman Gilbert.
Yes, sir. On D, I know you haven't got to D first yet, but on Office of Multicultural Affairs, I'm gonna appoint somebody tonight at 6.
Okay. All right, very well. Thank you, sir. Councilman Ledford.
Beer and Record Board for District 4, I will be reappointing the chairman of that board currently, and that's Dan Mayfield. Thank you.
Okay, and you'll do that tonight?
It'll be placed on I've asked the city attorney to place it on our agenda.
Got you. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. Nicole, I have someone that I want to submit for the Beer and Record Board, and I'll send that to you tonight, and we'll go from there. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Mitchell.
Procedural question.
Yes, sir.
Beer and Record Board. I thought those were mayoral appointments.
They are.
They are.
Okay,
Those will take care of themselves, it sounds like.
thank you.
Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. On number 2, under future legislation for the Juneteenth as a paid city holiday. I'm sure the council had the opportunity to look at those numbers that Daisy sent. And as always, of course, Daisy is going to send us the max value in that. But I would like for us to, Justin, and I know we're running out of time, but maybe next week, if he can be prepared to answer some questions as regard to how the holidays, how it works now. If it's a paid holiday off, what does that look like? What's the scheduling? So if trash, garbage is supposed to be picked up on Wednesday and a holiday fall on that Wednesday, do they just, you know, put the date to the next day? What does that look like? Does every employee have the ability to be off, or, you know, just the steps that they would take for the other 11 holidays, so that can add to our discussion on here as well.
The city code has got a provision at 2-3 in the city code that talks about your normal holidays and work schedules for city employees. And so that's how people get paid from the city, in addition to your budget ordinance each year that provides for payment. But it basically says that if the holiday falls on a Saturday, then the offices will be closed on the preceding Friday. And when it falls on a Sunday, then they'll be closed the next day on a Monday. And you currently have 11 paid holidays in the code. I did not, or in the employee information guide, they're not actually in your city code. They are under holiday pay at page 17 of the employee information guide. And there is no holiday in June right now. So that's another thing.
Right.
All right. You good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on Councilwoman Coonrod's request, I definitely would like to have a little bit of time, be it during strategic or our 3 o'clock meeting or 3:30 meeting, to discuss this a little bit more. I'd like to know some of the detail and the numbers that were presented. Is that in addition? I mean, I'm assuming since it's not a holiday, we're already paying people. So it doesn't make sense for it to be fully in addition. Obviously, it doesn't apply to every employee. So would they get comp pay? I mean, I think it's a good conversation to have, at least for the understanding of the council, to consider this item, but to better understand how that would work should we do that. And I don't know that we have a full grasp of that with the current holidays that we have. So I would definitely like some time to better understand that particular issue as well, so that we can make a more informed decision in moving forward and doing this for the employees. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman, you're wanting to do that in a 3:30 agenda session at a 2 o'clock strategic planning. What's that look like for you?
Either one. So I would just like a little time. We keep running out of time during these meetings, and then it just seems to stay on, some of these topics stay on there forever. So if it needs to be a committee meeting so that we can have somebody from the administration come up and answer questions and then let the council ask, that may be the best fit for this, because obviously it's a lot of money potentially that we're talking about to move forward with this. So I would just like to make sure that we had enough time and not
Okay.
breeze over it necessarily like some of these that we end up doing in strategy.
Councilman Gilbert, I think this would be a perfect fit for HR committee, and let's work together to plan a committee meeting during our 3:30 agenda and have the appropriate administrative people that we need to be present.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It is now 1:15. I want to give our attorney plenty of time for our attorney-client privilege meeting. So at this time, Vice Chair Smith, if you would end this meeting and start us back up, please, sir.
Yes, sir. See y'all in a minute.
Thank you.